up a dive. Feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, so I remember I share and subscribe. Join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Paranormal Spectrum right here on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Barnaby Jones. Today, we are live in the studio, so our guests are here with us today. If you guys have any questions throughout the show, throw them in the comments section, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. We have an awesome announcement here at Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. We got the amazing chance to be part of a new documentary series on TNE. It's a new paranormal show, and it debuts this Friday. Not sure which episode we're going to be in, but check it out.
A lot of people came here to raise their families, and then everything went to hell.
This town is haunted.
Where will you run?
It's got a lot of history that was never finished.
Where will you hide?
I have got to leave.
When home is where the haunt is.
You can leave, but this place is never going to leave you.
My Haunted Hometown. New episode Friday at 10. Only on TNE. Now in free preview.
So cool. I don't know which episode we're going to be part of, but our team filmed 2 different locations with them, and they're not in episodes 1, 2, or 3, but hang in there because we're sure that they're going to be part of it, and it'll be really cool. Check that out. All right, guys, if you want to meet us in person, we are going to be at the Bell City Paracon in Summers, Wisconsin, November 2nd. We are going to be in Lexington, Kentucky at CryptidCon November 23rd and 24th. We are going to be in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, November 30th for the MetaParaPros Psychic Soul and Synergy event. And in May of next year, we are going to be at the Wisconsin Cryptids, Anomalies, and Paranormal Convention in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I have a ton of library presentations as well throughout October and November. So if you head on over to wisconsincaps.com, check out our public events tab. You can get all the information on all of those events and more. So guys, if you want to show your support for all things here on the Untold Radio Network, here's how.
Hey, Untold Radio Network fans. Want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
All right, guys, we have not one, but 2 amazing guests on today's show. First off, he has been on my other show already. I'd like to welcome back to the show filmmaker and researcher. Please welcome Ron Meyer back to the show. Welcome to the show, man.
Morning. Good to be back on. You're looking spiffy in the morning.
Well, thank you very much. You are very dapper as well this evening. Awesome. And we also have here Dr. John Stone joining us on the show. Welcome to the show, John.
Welcome. Thanks for having us on.
Awesome. Well, you guys, John has had a very interesting experience, and that has been documented by Ron, who you've made this whole documentary about it, and kind of it follows what happened with John, correct? Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us about the project to begin with and how it kind of came about?
So I presume most of your audience have heard of near-death experiences. Would you say that's true?
Sure. Let's do a really quick, just what it is and the general what you're calling.
So many people probably have had, throughout history, a near-death experience where they almost die. Maybe certain aspects of their functionality, particularly with their brain, shuts down. And then for whatever reason, back in the old days, they get revived and they come back and they report that they had some sort of experience, which was quite mystical and quite filled with things like love and pure light and moving down a tunnel. But once, medical ability to bring people back from the dead after heart attacks and other, infections and stuff like that, where they experience the same thing, but medicine now allows people to bring them back. And so there's like thousands of cases now. And you go on YouTube and you can hear all these reports that people have.
Millions, actually.
Millions, yes. Okay. Yeah. And it's a growing number. And it's probably the single most scientifically studied paranormal phenomena, because often they all report leaving the body. That's one of the characteristics. And the physical body behind, and entering another realm, which allows them to have different kinds of experiences. There's still consciousness, but usually language is not part of it. But in the process, they're able to look down and see what's going on with the medical people and their family. So when they come back, they describe, well, I saw you, doc, go in and look at my chart in the next room. And that's how things get verified, because that would be impossible, right, from many perspectives. And so I've been hired to do a film on near-death experiences by a company. And as I was gathering interviews for that movie, I noticed that there's a great similarity to experiences that John has had over the course of his history. And these would be typical mystical experiences. In fact, one of the people that's in this movie, and it had multiple mystical near-death experiences, says that near-death experience is a subcategory of mystical experiences. So I thought, well, I'll just have John sit in on the interviews towards the end of my interview with these people, and he would interact with them. And the interactions were so interesting that I decided I could make a short movie combining what happened when he got to interact with these people, and make an argument or a case for the fact that there's a way of entering this realm that these near-death experiences have, that you don't have to die, which is pretty spooky, or nearly die. And that's available and has been available to people for a long time. I've had my own experience of some of these things that they report, like the void or the emptiness or the space of pure potential where there's nothing, there's no me, there's no world, just infinite potential is one way to describe it. So this is the result of that, experience of bringing these people together with John, which was very cool for everybody. And I hope it's cool for people too, to understand that it's available to them. That's what I'm trying to say.
I believe that the link to the documentary on YouTube is in the show notes as well, and it is now in the comments section for anyone that's interested in going and checking out. John, so let's start with you then here. Can you tell me, if you're comfortable, talk a little bit about your experience and what happened?
You mean experience doing the film, or
the near-death experience?
Oh, I have not had a near-death experience. I've had quite a few mystical experiences.
Oh, okay.
As Ron said, Ron was doing the film, and I thought, well, I might as well look into near-death experiences. Ron is always doing something interesting. So I did that, and I was struck by the descriptions that people had of the other realm, particularly those who had come close to experiencing what they called God or Jesus Christ, or people had, or the source, or people had different ways of describing it. And it correlated with my own experiences to the point where some of the things they said brought me to tears, because it reminded me of what I experienced myself. Specifically, the encounter with the divine, you could call it God, the ultimate, the absolute, which is totally beyond description. Just waiting for you to come back there. And also the experience of unconditional love. So I'd become aware of both of those in my numerous experiences, and I thought, my God, they're talking about the same stuff that I have experienced, except they got at it in a very different way. Fortunately, I didn't have to die, though. In the mystical literature, there is an expression, die before you die. So there's often the idea that you have to go through some kind of metaphoric death, but you can often feel like you're. I've had a number of occasions I felt like I was about to die, though I wasn't actually, but I was going to disappear, or something weird is going to happen. And on one occasion I did disappear, like what Ron was saying. There was nothing, which was revelatory, but it wasn't so much that, it was the unconditional love and the encounter with God or the divine that I resonated with.
Interesting. Yeah, I apologize for the miscommunication there. I thought that that's how this whole thing started, was that you had one, and that's what led to it. Okay, I gotcha. So,
though I've become part of I got to know Peter Panagores in the film, and I joined his little community of mystical experiencers, a lot of them NDEers, but also other people like me who just have had what are called spiritually transformative experiences, and we're all talking the same language. So,
Interesting. So, can you tell us a little bit more about, how do you have these experiences? How does that come about without being a near life ending experience? What kind of situations, what kind of like meditations, or what were you doing that put you in that state?
That's an interesting question. Sometimes people, they happen almost spontaneously out of the blue. People will just kind of notice something and then they're gone. Eckhart Tolle is a famous example. That might be familiar to some people, a lot of people in the audience. But in my case, I went to a retreat and we asked, the center of the retreat was what's called contemplation. We contemplated a question, who am I? Traditional spiritual question. So that's one way to do it, to continually question who am I or what am I in a very intense manner, but really wanting to know, not just sort of repeating the question, but really wondering who you are. And in this particular retreat, I can go into some details about it if you'd like, but
Absolutely.
It's called an enlightenment intensive. The one I was in lasted 4 days, though I've been in ones that lasted 2 weeks. They can be quite intense. You get up at 6 in the morning and go until 11 at night. And you spend most all your time in contemplation. So you're always asking that question. But there's these structured exercises where you sit with a partner, and the partner will say to you, tell me who you are. So they give you the question. And then once you receive the question, you contemplate the question. And whatever comes up as a result of your contemplation, you communicate to your partner. So that's the Western side of things. The Eastern side would be you'd contemplate the question and then shut up. You talk to your teacher maybe once a day. But in this case, the communication and having someone across the way who's supposed to just receive it and not make any comments is very powerful and opens people up in quite an amazing way. And I won't go into all the details of it, but on the last day, I will say this, at one point I noticed I really didn't know who I was. And that struck me as so odd because I was 47 at the time. How could I not know who I am, in the way that they were talking about? So I became, well, who am I? I really wanted to know. And that fueled the rest of the contemplation. So that was a key for me. But on the last day, I should say this, but before this started, I was an agnostic. I didn't know, God in the sky, I was a materialist, pretty much. But on the last day, I had there you go. The last day, I had this experience of knowing who I am, what I am, without any words. I couldn't say what it is. It cannot be said. But it was so intense, it felt like my body had been plugged into a socket. And this rush of energy went up me, and I was shivering and shaking and sobbing because it was so wonderful. It felt like being reunited with someone who'd been long dead that I really loved. So it was deeply familiar. I mean, how could you not be familiar to yourself? It was deeply familiar, and yet I'd never ever experienced it in my memory, and it was so intense and so beautiful. It just blew me away. But then I looked around and I saw that it was everything, and that's what really, even the cars. And so it was just, what do I do that? How do I understand that? And two things happened as a result. I was the person who led it is a guy named Peter Ralston. He's a martial artist. And right after that was going to be a 7-day boxing camp. It's like an odd juxtaposition. And I've studied Aikido for 40 years, 6th-degree black belt. Let me get this phone out of here. And I was deeply interested in the boxing, but I'd lost all interest in it. So when I got on the mat, I was just, why am I doing this? Which is deeply confusing. And it took, and then when I got home after this, my interest did come back. Excuse me. But at the end of it, I went home and I tried to make sense of what I was doing. And I started reading up, and I started reading the works of mysticism, and they made sense. Suddenly the mystics made sense. So I went from being agnostic to being aware of something which was vastly greater, which was me, but also everything. And it was so wonderful that I was in love with it, you could say. It loved me and I loved it. It was the same event. And I had no words for it. So, but these mystics were, I'd read the mystics and it resonated in some way. And then the world changed. The world had changed completely. By which I mean, it was as if a new sense had opened up. And I can tell a little story about that. There was a New Yorker article about a woman, which was by the woman herself, who grew up being unable to see in 3 dimensions. I think she had one eye going off this way for, first 5 years of her life, and then it was corrected, and she was able to bring her eyes together. But by then, the world was already created for her, so that when she brought her eyes together, stereo vision or the 3rd dimension didn't exist for her, and she just functioned, and it took her a while to realize that other people saw things differently. But she functioned just fine. But when she was an adult, I think she was in her 30s, she decided she really wanted to know, a little bit like what I want to know. What is this 3rd dimension stuff that everybody's talking about? So she just threw herself into it until finally one day, ta-da, there was the 3rd dimension. And she was so enthralled with it that she just went around looking at everything. Oh my God, 3 dimensions. That's closer than this. We all take that for granted, but you can imagine what it's like if you don't have that, or say you don't have color and then suddenly you have color. Well, the experience of this, I call it the spiritual dimension, opened up. So it's as if that way. It was that radical a change.
Wow, that's interesting. When you're talking there, I don't know if you guys have ever read there's a book series called Aragon, and it's about this boy who becomes a dragon rider. Yeah. And the movie's terrible. Don't watch the movie, but the books are great. And they have this ancient language in the book. And one of the things that he does in the book is he has to learn his true name in the ancient language. And it sounds very much like kind of your introspective and stuff of learning about yourself and learning who you are, because he has to go through this whole thing of learning what his actual name is in the ancient language to understand that. And when he does, he has this, this awakening, and it sends a shiver through him, much like you described. And it's really interesting. And I wonder, like, Christopher Paolini, the guy that wrote that, if he's had some sort of journey in that same form to be able to write about that and talk about that, because it sounds very much like your introspective of finding yourself and that one of who am I really. It's really interesting. So I just kind of wanted to make that little connection for people like there that have read the book and stuff. So
yeah, and one of the interesting things is nobody is ever disappointed when they find out who they are. Really.
It gives you a whole new viewpoint. You can always change who you are. If you don't like what you'd find as this is who I am, well, that's introspective on your own, that you need to say, well, I don't like this part of me. I need to be a better person, or I need to change that.
That can happen, because one of the things you discover is that you are none of the things you think you are. So all the thoughts you have about yourself are made up. Even the
And
sense of
changing.
self, and
And
changing.
changing.
Whereas who you are does not change. It's always true. You're always you. And that realization creates freedom so that you can let go of some of the things that it takes a while. It took me a while to let go of a lot of the things that I thought about myself, but that was one of the results. Deeper and deeper self-acceptance. And that's one of the most powerful results of it. As I say, nobody's ever disappointed. They're always like, oh my God, it's me.
One of the more interesting things about near-death experiences to consider is that with the millions, no one's ever reported when they left their body that they entered something like hell. It's all pretty much kind of in some way or another what John has just described, which I think could be, valuable to people who fear death. One of the things that happens with people who have near-death experiences, they have no fear of death anymore because they've already experienced it. And they know that it ain't hell.
So, Ron, you mentioned that you had some experiences as well that were similar to that. Do you want to talk about those?
I could. So, and the other thing we should talk about is he alluded to it, is that when you have these experiences, these altered state experiences, which can be brought about by seeing a Bigfoot or a UAP or a UFO briefly, that people change in some way. Certainly their worldview changes as to what's possible. And what was weird before is not weird anymore. And so you need something even stronger to become weird to experience. And it kind of leads you in a direction. And when you have these experiences, one gains certain abilities. I gained certain abilities, superhuman capabilities. John had one where he would be very useful in a martial arts way. He could feel what was going to happen with people before they did. And for a while, he tried to teach it, if I remember. He thought it was teachable, but it wasn't as teachable as he thought it was. But anyhow, so at the same kind of retreat that he was in, I had two experiences of the void where I experienced. So I've had multiple experiences called non-dual, which is the goal of many meditative practices, including Buddhism in particular and Zen, where the illusion of the self, or the construction of the self, because it's produced by the brain in some sense, goes offline. And there's just experience, not experience. There's no experiences to experience.
Oops, a little freeze
just
there.
The world. Huh? Do you want to say something, John?
There we go. Nope.
Okay.
Just internet lagging. Yeah.
Okay, so I've had multiples of those, and twice on retreat, but there was always the world. There was no Ron there, but the world was still there. The experience was there, but there was just no agent like me receiving it, experiencing the world. But twice on the retreats, I had the experience where everything disappeared. And there's this experience. It's indescribable, but there's nothing outside of it. There are no edges. There's no definition to it. And yet it's everything in some way that I can't quite explain, but also infinitely powerful, which sort of sounds like God, right? God can do anything, create anything. Sort of like that. That's, these are the words that I know. But the one that really started me going was one of the things that near-death experiences talk about is sometimes they describe their journey through the non-physical as going through rooms, because that's the only language they have. And there's the room of the dark light, which is the one I just talked about, the void. But it's a room of all knowledge where you know everything. And I had one of those in a dream when I was in China in the 1980s, one of the first people to travel all through China and make a documentary about China at the time. And we were outside a Taoist temple. I don't know if that's significant. but I had this dream where I learned everything. I knew everything. It's hard to say it, but I knew the truth of everything that everybody's searching for. But when I woke up, it immediately started dissipating and going away, which is what near-death experiences often recount. And they're saying, and they say, well, they spent the rest of their life trying to retrieve what it is that they forgot. To some extent, that's what happened to me. But when at the time of the dream, I'll call it the dream, there was a person there, a man who was my guide in a way. He was my guide. And then the last step in our journey through China was to go to Tibet. In Tibetan Buddhism, that's one form of Buddhism. And the most sacred place in Tibetan Buddhism is in the capital city of Lhasa, and it's in a building called the Jokan. So we got into the Jokan to film, and when we walked in, there was the guy in my dream waiting for me. And he immediately took me aside and told me I was a Lama too. And I thought, oh God, I don't know what the fuck that means. And he showed me a secret room where he said the bones of Siddhartha was, and then he turned to me. This is all through a translator, of course. And he said, "You got to save Tibet." And I thought, "Whoa, that's interesting." Fortunately, I was there. We had traveled with Jimmy Carter accidentally. Remember, he was a president that we had. He looked into, people, human abuses, in terms of situations. And he arranged for me to meet. So I had also earlier done a film on cranes of the world. Two young men out of Baraboo. You know where Baraboo is, I take it.
International Crane Foundation.
Yeah. So I told him I was going to go to China and Tibet because, we stayed in contact. And I said, well, if you get there, we want to get in there. There's a non-migratory crane there called blackneck crane. And the Chinese said, we can get in because they had good relations with the Chinese at that time. But you need an invite because it's an autonomous province. So I knew what I had to do. I had to get an invite for them. And Jimmy Carter helped me get introduced to the mayor of Lhasa, if you could call him a mayor. And he was kind of a funny little guy, and told him my problem. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. And he actually got an invite to George Archibald. I don't know if you ever met him at Baraboo. And they got in there, and they had eyes then on what was going on because the Chinese were killing the cranes to eat them, and they were endangered, and they were also kind of messing with the Tibetans. And so in a sense, I fulfilled what I had to do. I got somebody in there, and then people flowed in quite regularly after that. Conservationists and people. And so that was an impossible event for me. It would be for most people, right? How could that be? How could this person be in my dream and then be waiting for me? It's like he's manipulating things in a level I can't imagine what was going on. So that set me on a path. That was also almost the first 3 years or 4 years that I started Aikido and met John. So we began our journey at that point together. I've had other ones, but that's enough for now.
You really have led an amazing life, let me tell you that. Just the little snippets that come out on this show, and I just you did what now? That's fascinating. That's awesome, man. No, it's really interesting because you do hear stories like that all the time of people that have a dream, and it's very vivid, it's very realistic to them, and it's just a dream. And then all of a sudden they see that same person from their dream, and they're like, what happened? And it's even more profound for you because here is this Tibetan person, these monks or whatever that are highly into all that stuff that maybe he projected himself into your dream. Like you said, maybe this wasn't just a random thing that you dreamt, but maybe he put it there to say there's something about you that you need to come find me, and you need to be put on this path. Did you save Tibet?
Did I save it?
Yeah, you said that he told you you had to save Tibet. Have you saved it yet?
I did, in a way.
Yeah,
I certainly saved the black-necked crane.
that's good enough for me. I'm all about the animals, man.
You go. So again, when you have these altered state experiences and the near-death experiences and John's mystical experiences are very profound forms of these experiences, you often develop new capabilities that you didn't have before, or they were in buds and then all of a sudden they bloom, whatever metaphor you want to use there, emerge. And I think that's one of the reasons people need to, particularly because kids have these experiences a lot and they get buried because parents think they're crazy or just being stupid or lying or whatever. But those are probably buds that will allow them to become almost superhuman beings if they were allowed to flourish. And so one of the goals that both John and I have is to legitimize these experiences in a way that people can say, okay, yeah, they occur. They may not be explainable by, a materialist scientific point of view or even some spiritual practices, but they're real and they're important.
Yeah, there's something about the experiences that if you are able to express, at least talk about them, they tend to open up. So if you might have an experience, but if you're able to, particularly if you can talk from the place that you have the experience, which is a little difficult to understand till you've had one, but there's a new knowing, and if you talk from that new knowing, it opens up. So when people have experiences and close and don't talk about them because this is so weird, I don't know what George is going to think about this, or whatever it is that keeps them from talking about it, or they talk about it and people just go, "I'm sorry, I think you're crazy," and they get closed down. It doesn't open up for them, and that's the opening up that we want to encourage, both Ron and I, that you can find people who can listen. There are people, particularly these days, groups everywhere, where you can share your experiences and be heard. And when you do that, all sorts of amazing things can happen. You don't know what will happen, of course. It's not like guaranteed that you'll have superpowers, but it's one of the things that can happen. And it certainly will change the world for you. And that's important.
I want to take a second here and remind everyone we are live in the studio today. So if anybody has any questions for either of these gentlemen, or if you've had a near-death experience or an experience similar to this, share it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Throw it in there if you're listening. So how has this, affected both of you guys? We'll start with Ron, like having these experiences. John, you had said that, like you were agnostic going into all this and stuff. Ron, I don't know where you were when this whole started for you and started having these experiences and this awakening, but how has it changed your outlook on, you talked about your views of death always change after you have these experiences, do you believe in a God? Do you believe in source? Do you believe in an all-powerful entity, or are you still afraid of death? How does this affect you, Ron?
Well, for a long time, I did traditional science for quite a while, and I suppose I would be called a mechanistic, materialistic science kind of person, that all can be explained by reducing things to the small. And the extreme form of that is everything's predetermined from the Big Bang onwards. And I bought into that, and I studied philosophy when I was a young person, and I was a logical positivist, which said all the spiritual, supernatural stuff was just bullshit. And when I had that experience in Tibet, that changed my point of view quite a bit. And that sent me on a path of exploration as to what in the heck this is about, which is why I'm sitting here talking to you now, in many ways. So I've had so many experiences since then that my worldview is, people, when they see these podcasts or see my movies, I did the one called The Bigfoot Alien Connection Revealed, and that had close to 10 million views across multiple platforms. And people have come up to me at conferences and they tell me their stories, and I validate them, and I'm used to it now. It's the world I live in. And no, I had no fear of death. In some way, I've died a couple times already, not in the sense of my physical body, like people who are, have heart attacks or in accidents, but complete disappearance of the constructed self. It's died. In consciousness, awareness is still there. It's always the same, never changes. It's open to anything. It's like the mirror that will reflect anything. When you look at it that way, it doesn't shows the good, bad, it's just there. And I started teaching flow practices based on my martial arts training, and everything just happens perfectly in the flow state. It's kind of like, the movie, The Force, Luke joined the Force. It's kind of like that. It's very much like that. And I go in and out of it periodically. I would say that was one of the main physical. I've been in the flow state, I'm like 80 years old now, and I've flipped into the flow state, and I have a 20-year-old body and can function that way again for a while. Which is wonderful. Why can't I do that all the time? I don't know.
Interesting. Kind of like a mind over matter. You're only as old as you feel, kind of, or you only as old as you think.
Maybe. Is it my mind, like what I've been told and so on, that limits me to being this old 80-year-old crotchety guy, kind of limping around to life right now? There's evidence that it doesn't have to be that way. And wouldn't that be wonderful if we could all move into that state more often than not? And I developed the ability that I use when I do interviews. When I make documentaries, I'm interviewing people all the time, in which it's called the mirror mind, where somehow I can get into this state where it's hard to explain, where people see that I see them, and that they're seen for who they really are. And John knows that that's something he's been describing, who he really is. And to be seen that way, a lot of times children are not seen for who they really are, this magnificent thing that John just talked about, and it's loved by God or whatever you want. And they get that feeling, and then they open up and they're willing to tell me. It's somewhat manipulative. They're able to tell me very well what I want them to tell me in terms of their expertise. And it's a skill. I can turn it off and on. But my teacher, who's in the movie, Ed Riddle, said, "Yeah, I have that skill too, but don't abuse it, because it's a kind of manipulation." So I only use it mostly when I'm doing it professionally, doing my filmmaking. But once in a while, I'll slip into it, and then people will tell me their life stories. Like, "Oh, go away! I don't want to hear this." Should I give you an example of that? One of my best friends is a fellow martial artist, and I know he likes the kind of woman, and his wife died and all that. And a woman came by and handing us her card as a real estate person. I could see that this guy said, "Oh, I could see that's the kind of woman I like, the way she looks." And so I turned on that ability, and she sat down and started talking to us, and going on and on. It's like, eventually it's like, "Oh, I got to stop this. I'm tired of this." So that's what can happen if I'm not paying attention to it carefully. So do you want to elaborate on that being seen? Because that seems to be really one of the biggest problems of the children is that they're not seen for who they really are, and they know it, and so they shut that down, and I think it handicaps them when they become screwed up people in adult life.
And absolutely, if you want to elaborate on that, and then also kind of talk about, like, how you feel now as far as like your views on life, your agnostic self, and what you believe now, if you would.
The concept of being seen, John, do you want to say something about that? You talked about it before.
Yes, it's I had that experience as a child of not really fully being. I was loved, but I didn't feel I was seen. I was a little different. Well, everybody's a little different, but I felt outside. I didn't feel seen by my peers. I didn't really feel completely seen by my father in particular. And I had realization recently that I am always seen. I had this experience of I heard this voice in my head, and it was my voice, and yet it wasn't really me. It's kind of hard to describe, but the voice said, "Love yourself as I love you." Those are the words, and immediately I understood something, which was that I was seen, and that I'm always seen. That the experience of being seen it's always true. It had always been true. So, but you can't expect others to see you, because they don't a lot of the times. That's something you can't demand of others. So you could say, I realized I was seen by God. That's one way of saying it's not quite right. And loved. And this is one of the things that the NDEers talk about, that they feel unconditional love, regardless of what they've done. There's not even any need for forgiveness. They're loved unconditionally in the other realm by God, and that is true. That's what I realized for myself, that the idea that God can ever reject anyone is just impossible. And that's the way I began to think about it. And before I even knew about the NDEs, that God loves everything equally, and everyone just as they are, just the way they are. Regardless of what you think of the way you are, you could say God loves you, but the word God is a little tricky, because people start thinking about this old guy in the sky and everything. But I will say this, that I use the word God because the experience of knowing God and being known by God is so intimate and deeply familiar that it's best talked about as if God is a being, but God isn't a being. But on the other side, God is completely unknown and unknowable. They're both aspects are in the experience of the divine. I could say a little bit more about how things have changed me, if you like.
Please, yes.
Well, I think the biggest change for me was personal. Well, there are two things. One was my ability in Aikido increased exponentially. I started seeing things I'd never seen before, and I developed this ability. I can feel, sort of like a synesthesia. When I look at something, I can feel it physically. So if someone moves toward me, I feel it. Like it's as if I'm being, like my inner space is being invaded. So getting out of the way is I just have to move out of what I feel. Move out of the way. It's not just that I see it; I can feel it. And at I remember one of the boxing seminars, it was so easy I could tell it was coming before it came. So I just, I move out of the way, and the fist would appear. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So that happened. But it also led eventually to my leaving Aikido. Both came as a result. And then the biggest change was deeper and deeper self-acceptance to the point where now I realize, I am home. I mean, this is home. I am home in this moment. Not just that I am in home, but I am at home. But And that's true of everyone, I think. That where you are, what I am, what I am supposed to be, and we could say where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So a deeper and deeper acceptance of the way it is, even though I'm experiencing a lot of illness lately, I'm at peace mostly. So that's the biggest change for me, as well as as well as opening up to the divine. Just to answer your question about belief, it isn't a matter. I don't believe in God. I experience God. You can say I know. That's kind of this isn't quite right, but I know God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's a big statement. Like, hi God, how are you doing? Hi John.
Hang out with him. Yeah,
it's not like that. But God is intimately a part of me and a part of everything. So, in that sense, I know God.
interesting.
So you asked me how it's changed me. So I would say that related to the flow practice is something called effortless power. I told you how I immobilized one of the road warriors,
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing anything. There was no me doing anything. And the look from the outside, as I was told, is that why couldn't the road warrior move and do something with me? I wasn't doing anything. So again, that constructed self, the one that dies, as John was mentioning, was gone. And I wasn't doing anything. And yet, in a way, I was doing amazing thing in a certain sense. It's hard to talk about because it's all about a letting go process. And so I'm still trying, I can't put all this together. I don't have a good enough imagination, but I think what everybody tells me, should stay on the table in terms of these experiences that probably people that come on your show and other shows like this, that they're real experiences, but how to, and I believe they happened, but the explanation eludes me right now to time. I don't have a bigger belief behind it all, that I can tell you right now the secret to the universe, as it were. But the process has always been letting go, or in a certain sense, dying to something that needs to die. And is that during near-death experiences, the way it's described is that, and this is during hallucinogenics too, is that the brain creates a model, this is scientific, of the world, and that's what and presents it to us. And that's what it uses to predict what's going to happen in the future, just like LLMs, the new AI stuff. And eventually, when you're quite young, it figures out it needs an agent, a self. So it creates that and puts it into the model too. And when people have near-death experiences or hallucinogenics, are the two things that have been studied a little bit with meditation, is that model, the brain making that model goes away. And what's real then can come through because the brain's not creating a model that's deceiving you, a necessary deception to function in the world. So that's kind of where I stand in that camp, that's what's happening as best we can tell with the brain and my interaction. This thing that's me, like John, but not quite hard to explain what it is. But it's certainly not the model that the brain presents, is not the essence of who I am.
Yeah, that's just experiencing that the one you thought you were is not who you are is quite revolutionary.
Holy shit! How could I have
how can that be? And particularly when you go away, it's like, oh my God. But parallel to what Ron was saying about the flow state, I've experienced a number of times in doing Aikido that I could do everything perfectly, but I wasn't doing anything, as Ron says, even though from the outside I was moving all over the place. I was just obeying the situation. I just surrendered to the situation and let the situation tell me what to do. And it was easy. All I had to do was say, yes, sir, and obey my orders, is one way of saying it. And the situation would just, okay, I have to go there. I'll go there. I mean, there was no thinking. There was no, matter of fact, I couldn't even remember what I did.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. I don't remember any of this stuff. When I write books and everything, there's no me doing it. When I do the interviews and I'm in that state, I don't remember a darn thing that ever anybody said. That I go back and review the footage. I mean, once in a while, I'll get like, oh, that was cool. I'll use that soundbite, but that's about the best of it. There's something that's gone that's allowing this, that opens the door for it, or some metaphor that allows for something larger truth to emerge that's been hidden by the brain function.
Yeah, the strange about the experience is I feel intensely present, but I can't remember it.
Exactly.
It's very, very odd. What did I just do? Sometimes I would do a technique. I said, well, what's that? What was that? What did I do? I try to repeat it. It took me a while. To remember. Oh, that's wow. And I would always go, wow, how did I do that? That's cool. Let's try that. Just spontaneously.
But John and I are not special. This is available to everybody, including you.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's our message. You are that special, each and every one of you that's listening.
Yeah, and that knowing in that space is available, since it's you, to everyone. It's just a matter of getting out of the way. That's the hard part.
Well, let's delve down that a little bit. What for anybody that's listening or wants any more information on this kind of stuff, how would you guys point them in a direction? Is there some place that they should go to learn more about this, or teachers or books, or how do people have those experiences?
Well, there's an organization for enlightenment intensive. John is connected with that. I'm not.
Yeah, there are enlightenment. You can look up enlightenment intensives. There are a number of people giving them throughout the United States. They're not for everyone. They're rather intense, and they can seem kind of cerebral to some people. Also, you have to be willing to expose yourself, open yourself to other people, and let whatever's coming up come out, even when it's difficult to talk about. So it can be difficult, but it's immensely rewarding. So if anyone, I would, challenging and rewarding, if that sounds like your cup of tea, I would recommend enlightenment intensive. But there are many spiritual traditions, and Eckhart Tolle is a good teacher.
Yeah,
I believe,
and he's evolving and coming more along. He's changed quite a bit. He's pretty much in the same camp we're speaking right now.
Yeah, and he's very accessible, and free of the problems that often go around gurus. There's no groupies, there's no sex behind the scenes and stuff like that. He's really quite an amazing man. And I will mention Peter Ralston has written a number of books which could be interesting to people. Peter Ralston, he's written a book called The Book of Not Knowing, for example.
And one thing anybody could do is sort of imagine, like right now, that everything's perfect. There's nothing for you to do. There's no problem to solve. What would that be like?
Yeah,
you'd be very free. And you can kind of practice that at any moment in the day, where you're struggling or so on, and you're in traffic. And what if you say, what if there's no problem? There's nothing, because there's no me here. And often you can flip into a state where it just sort of resolves itself. And again, it's kind of that little death of the constructed self. The constructed self is the one that's having problems. And it's looking to the future and saying, oh, and remembering the past and saying, oh. But if you don't do any of that, that's all fine. There's none of that going on. It's just all right now. Everything's just fine at this very instant. That's what Eckhart Tolle means by the present. In the present, there's never anything wrong. In this very, very small little space of time, everything's just perfect. But it's always that way.
I do want to, we talked about being seen and stuff, and the Sacred Pathways over here in the comments section left a very nice comment, but it cuts off. It says at the end, but what happened to me, So I would love to share what happened to you and have a little discussion about that if possible. But if you could just copy what happened to me was, and then the rest of it and re-put it in the comments. I think it just got cut off. They do mention, I apologize, that's over your face. I don't know why it's doing that. It should readjust. But it says, I'm always so interested in this as I remember dying and reincarnating. It was so vivid, and I have known my whole life that they told me that I wasn't that good before. And I picked my own mom, and they always told me at 6 that I would not always feel loved. That day came when COVID hit, and I was a physician's assistant and saw that it was going to be going on, and my parents and others did not agree, as stated those vax were poison, and my family had not spoken to me since. Here we go. Thank you very much. But what happened to me was real, and they let me remember certain things. I don't know. I felt like I was being deceived by them. Answers would not be good, and why I had to know all this is beside me. So basically, you remember like your past life or knowledge of a past life, and that you reincarnated, picked your mom and stuff like that, and you don't know why. Do you guys have any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, certainly go ahead, John.
I was just going to say that's this kind of thing that the near-death experiencers have, that kind of knowledge, except they remember why they were reincarnated. So it's unfortunate this person is not able to access that. I wish them the ability to do that, so that gets resolved for them.
Ron, do you have anything to add?
No, I've heard that from near-death experiencers, that if it's what it says is that there's this realm to which we really belong in our home and are loved in unconditionally, like John describes, that many people have said that they have chosen to be reincarnate in this world and have a kind of mission and spend quite a bit of their life trying to figure out when the heck that is. And when they're told to come back, often that they haven't completed that mission. I think that's part of the story. And I think it was Peter who said that he would just as soon go back to that because it was so wonderful, but he feels he has to help other people. That's his mission now. So you got
Peter Panagore.
Yeah. And they also say that it would be difficult to live in this incarnation, in this body, if you remember too much of what you were before. It would be conflicting. And they got a sense that was the case in some way. I mean, I don't know that, but that's what I've heard from near-death experiencers. That they can't remember who they were before, but they knew this is not the first time they've done this.
And they choose to, what I've read, they choose to incarnate in this realm because there's something here they need to learn, and one of the ways they learn it is through suffering. That suffering serves a purpose of, and this is actually what Eckhart Tolle talks about. The suffering is a call to wake up. You don't wake up unless you suffer, well, usually, because if you're uncomfortable with your life, you're not going to change. Why change? I'm happy with what I'm doing. But in order to get to the next level of consciousness, you could say a challenge is needed.
That was the story of Buddha, right?
Yeah.
He lived this perfect life as a prince, and then all of a sudden he got out in the real world and said, "Oh my God, this is really what it's like. Everybody's suffering."
Yeah, he saw an old man, and he saw a dead man, and he saw a sick man. And he said, "What is this? Why is this?" So he went out and, what is life? What is death? That was his question. And it was the suffering that brought him to that. And it was also true of Eckhart Tolle. I don't know, are you familiar with his story?
I am, of course.
Well, he was living in London. He's a German living in London, going to school. And he had been a very unhappy guy. He was about 20, late 20s, 28, something like that. Being a really unhappy guy, very unhappy. He had suicidal thoughts and all sorts of things. And one night, as he was about to go in bed, he said, "I can't stand myself anymore. I can't stand myself." And then he suddenly had this thought, well, who is this one that can't stand this one? So he realized that there was these two things. I can't stand myself, as if there was a self he couldn't understand, and there was an I not be able to stand it. And it just so its mind just went totally blank, like this. And then he felt this whirling sensation, this whirling void opened up, and he just kind of fell into it. And then fell asleep. And the next morning woke up, the world was completely changed. And he spent the next 2 years basically living on a park bench in complete bliss, because everything was perfect, and he was very, very happy. So his sense of self, suffering led him to this question: what is the one? Who is the one suffering? Who is the one suffering, and who is the one who is not suffering? And then he went away. His normal way of his all sense of himself just completely left him, and he was in this state of bliss and happiness. And he didn't know what had happened. He just was really happy. And eventually he developed into he wrote The Power of Now, which was featured on Oprah's show. Became an international bestseller. And he became a spiritual teacher. He's quite a guy.
Interesting. The Sacred Pathway says they felt that wasn't good enough and had to come back and fix it. And it brings them heartache a lot. And I think that's kind of what you guys both touched on in that. Do you guys have any advice for them to where they should start? Obviously we talked about some of the places and to reach out to, but if you have anything else to add to help them, that'd be awesome.
Well, what do you think, Red? International Association of Near-Death Studies? Might be a place to start.
The what's her name's Ivani's group?
Yeah, Ivan Kazan.
Spiritual Awakenings.
Spiritual Awakenings International is one, and the other one is IANS, or International Association of Near-Death Studies. It might be worthwhile to look into, read about other near-death experiences that other people have had. So it sounds like she's a lot of what she talks about sounds very much like what the near-death experiencers talk about, except perhaps without the extra knowledge that they gained from the other side. But they realized that they were here for a mission and they had to learn something.
So there's a friend of mine. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Kripal. He writes books on this stuff, and from my point of view, he's got the best, you might say, framework for thinking about all these events. He wrote a book called The Flip, which is an easy thing you could probably Google and find it. And he's done a number of podcasts. I think people would enjoy his point of view. But this is something that's evolving right now in terms of humans, as I believe it is, that there are all these different types of experiences people have, and you have many people on your show that have anomalous experiences or things that are impossible. And one of the goals of the movie you'll have the trailer to is to point out that in some way they're all kind of connected. And the thing that connects them is us humans. None of these would be experienced if there weren't any humans to experience them.
Absolutely. Do you want to, we are at our, coming up on the end of the show here, we want to show the clip here that you sent me, and then you can kind of talk about that a little bit as well?
Yeah, it's only 2 minutes long.
Awesome. All right, let's
you got to cut it down to 2 minutes. You know, that's...
The reason that we were teaching the metal bending process to normal people, I did a lot of this in the military and some very senior people, it was not to bend metal. That was not the objective. The objective was to have people have an understanding that there's more to consensus reality than they generally believe.
The most simple relationship between that Bigfoot and UFOs are related is because both of them involved a manipulation of space-time.
I don't think that working at the Institute of Nomadic Sciences has changed my opinion very much about human potential, because I think I came here already with the notion that we're capable of much more than we're told that we are.
Maybe we'll find one little insight that gives us more information about our scientific knowledge that could increase mankind's ability to do things, 10, 100,000-fold.
Science and religions have offered great insights into the nature of reality and the human potential. But the growing consensus is that the big questions, the big mysteries remain. Are we alone in the universe? What is consciousness? And finally, is there life after death? Learn the answers in The Bigfoot, UFO, Human Link, Revealed.
Ron, I apologize too. I didn't mean to cut you off there. I thought you were done talking and I clicked the button to go with the thing, and yeah, so
that's what I said, push the button.
Okay.
I just telepathically made you do it. It makes me feel comfortable.
Apparently, yeah. So this is your new documentary, right? That just is it out now, right? Or not yet?
Not yet.
Okay. So how does this one kind of link in with what we've been talking about?
It involves near-death experiencers as well, and it shows all these things that are impossible. And the argument I'm making is that they all should be on the table, and I think they're all some way connected, as the title suggests. They're all linked to us in a way that we're trying to figure out, but don't have the imagination to quite grasp yet. And we're on that path, and I think what John and I are doing and is part of that push to help people experience this. Charles Tart, who was the founder of parapsychology in the movie, says that so many children, live terrible lives because when they have these experiences, they're shoved. People don't believe them, and they tell them they're crazy and do all sorts of, or have exorcisms or whatever. And it's really harmful to the human beings when they have these experiences early on.
That was true of the near-death experiencers in the beginning. When they would tell people about them, they said, all I do are just hallucinating. They knew that they hadn't been hallucinating, so they just shut up. And for years, they wouldn't talk about it. But that's not true anymore. But that's the way it was for many years.
Just in the Bigfoot realm, there's so many people that have these experiences of Bigfoot. They see them, and they just disappear into nothing. And I give example in the movies of some pretty ordinary people who had those experiences and then never talked about it for 20 years because, they lived in Nebraska and people would say they were crazy. And so now they're beginning to come forward and it's a relief to them. And that opening up process 20 years later is beginning to happen. Should ask Doug sometime what he thinks about it.
Absolutely. Do you think that do you think that this, all this stuff is connected? I agree with this 100%. Do you think that, these things that are disappearing, the Bigfoots and stuff like that, do you think that they're actually the Bigfoot, or is it something that is presenting itself as a Bigfoot?
I don't know. I think there's a mental aspect and there's a physical aspect. Sometimes, you can go find a footprint, like they did with Patty, right? Mm-hmm. Patty's the famous, that the two boys, filmed way back in the 50s, I guess it was.
If you don't know who Patty is, you shouldn't be watching this show. Let me just say that.
So I think both these things are there, but it's a human, and I think in some way, like Alexandria said, that whatever the it is, and that's what you're asking, what is the it behind this? Mm-hmm. Is it's precognitive. So when somebody's driving down the road, a country road, and a Bigfoot runs across, the Bigfoot, whatever that is, whatever the it is, knew in some way that the person would be driving down the road. It didn't happen accidentally. Mm-hmm. And if you look at all the stuff at you saw Travis Taylor, you know who he is, right, from Skinwalker Ranch. As Alexander said, everything they tried to do gets thwarted, right? That's the thing that happens. And so for that to happen, whatever the it is at Skinwalker Ranch is precognitive. Do you think the audience knows what precognitive is?
Hopefully.
and when John and I are in the flow state, or we know in some way, we also know at the same time, in the same way, what's going to happen because we deal with it. Would you say, John, that it's kind of like we know that in a way that's not normal knowing?
Yeah, it's impossible not to know it because it's right there in front of you.
It's kind of like what you were talking about with the boxing, with feeling the movement or seeing the movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there in front of me. All I have to do is open up to it. That's the way it experience. And
so that's
get out, not just get myself out of the way, and just, as Ron says.
So these are all kind of clues to say there's something about that precognitive, that's the only word I can use now, that's behind it all. Whatever it is. That's as far as I can go. But I see that commonality in all these things. I don't know how to go any further, and I don't. My imagination fails me here as to.
Yeah, there's a knowing which is very much like not knowing, which is a kind of weird thing to say, but in some way you stop knowing what you normally know, and in that state of not knowing, this other kind of knowing, which is like like not knowing, becomes available to you, but it's not yours. I don't experience that as mine. It just becomes available.
But whatever that it is that's making these anomalous experiences, including UAP, it's the same thing. That's what I'm trying to say, if that makes any sense. Does that make sense to you, John?
I'm not as conversant in the paranormal as you are, so I'll leave that to you, Ron.
Okay. That's my guess.
I think it kind of goes with, with all this stuff, multiple times you guys have said that, you have this experience, you don't have the words to describe it. And I think that goes with a lot of this stuff in the paranormal realm or the metaphysical stuff that, the adage that a fish doesn't know he's wet, right? Because you're constantly in this state and you don't know anything beyond it. So you don't have the words to describe what it is that this other is. So how could you ever know that you're missing out on all this stuff when you don't know that it existed to begin with.
But in some peculiar way, I'm saying it is us. We are that. That I can't put my finger on, but I'm pretty well convinced that we are that at the most fundamental level, whatever that is.
And our normal sense of self kind of closes the door to that, you could say, or a normal way of holding. As soon as you think you know what the world is, you close the door. It's a bit like that. Or as soon as you think, oh, this is the way it is, I know it. What'd you say, Ron? That closes the door?
Yes.
Pretty
These are just metaphors.
Yeah, just metaphors.
Best we can do now.
Yeah.
Lift the veil, there are all these ones.
You have to sort of as Ron says, you have to let go of something. You have to let go of knowing. Or it's taken away from you, one or the other. And that's what happens to a lot of people, I think, is just taken away. If you encounter Bigfoot, it's just taken away. It's like, oh my God, this is unknown. I don't know what this is.
That makes a lot of sense. It's if the second you think you know what's going on, you've shut that door to any more possibilities. And by doing that, you're like, yep, this is it. I understand it. And you close it, and you're missing out on all this other stuff that goes with it. And you could learn so much and experience because you're trying to put it in that box. You're trying to put a name on it. You're trying to put that tag.
Yeah, that can even apply in every, if there's something that if you have a spare 5 or 10 minutes, sometimes you can just take an object, any object, and just stop knowing what it is and just regard it and see if you can just see it as it is for itself, not for what it does for you, what it means to you, but what it is. I mean, this is a very simple exercise, but the longer you stay with it, the more mysterious it will become, and the more it will become tantalizingly unknown. And that you can do that with a pen. Because it's something we really know what this is, right? Or you can do it with a tree or anything.
You know what it is again because we've put a name to it.
Yeah,
but if you don't have that name to it, look at Little Mermaid with the fork. This is a hairbrush. This is whatever it is, because you've taken away the knowing, as you said, of what it is, and you're able to look at it from this broad spectrum of what could it be, what does it do, how does it interact, and that's a really cool experiment. I like that. Awesome. You guys, you've been very gracious. This is an amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. If anybody in the comments has any last minute things to throw out there, get them in there and we will get to them before we sign off here. I want to give each of you guys a little bit of time here just to, if you have anything coming up or promote or anything or any final thoughts. We'll start with you, Ron.
So I just finished writing with my writing buddy, Mark Reeder, a book called Jesus Had a Near-Death Experience. And one of the we set it up that he goes out in the desert and what he experienced and what the crucifixion is very much like a near-death experience as people describe them now. And so the book then consists that there are people that have found a way to medically induce near-death experiences, and they enter that world of knowledge, that room of knowledge that I told you about, and they bring back ideas for technology or new understandings in mathematics. They call them downloads now. It's a pretty common phenomenon. And the story revolves around the group of people we call them the Invisible Academy. It was such a group that, was doing these things, getting these downloads, like Stephen Jobs was one of them. The guy who came up with Apple, he got a download of what the phone would be, and then worked to make it happen. So that triggered his imagination. That's where imagination comes in. And the story is that some group of people think there's apocalyptic scenario in our future, and that there's this thing that technological societies don't make it through the bottleneck, so they find a way to create these artificial intelligences that represent the human value. They're von Neumann universal constructors, and they go into space and go exploring and self-replicate and so on. And so these people are racing to make that happen before the world goes to hell. So that book will be coming out. How's that?
Very good. Very good. Very good. All right. John, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, I just encourage anyone, if they've had unusual experiences that I've never talked about it, find a way of opening up, letting that inform them, finding an audience where they can be listened to, and particularly notice what's happening inside them. A lot of times people have the experiences, it seems to be on the outside, but it's what happens, the transformation inside, that's the most important thing. And I will say that knowing who you are is well worth the question. We all, you could say, to use theological language, we all have the light of God within us, and it is possible to become aware of that, and it changes everything. It's not exclusive. It's not special. It's part of being human. And part of it is being who you are, which is the one you are without your story. Just right now, in this moment, the one who's seeing, hearing, thinking, that one, that's where you begin. So don't hide your light under a bushel basket, as it says in the Bible.
Very good. Very good. A lot of appreciate the show very much. Thank you so much for your time. Great show. Another one, great show. Very easy to understand. Awesome. So you've definitely impacted a lot of people today as well. So thank you guys so much for everything, your time today, and just sharing your thoughts and experiences with us.
Thank you for having us.
It's been wonderful. See you again.
Awesome. Always a pleasure, man. Anytime, reach out. Love to have both of you guys back. I know there's so much more we can delve into. And again, Ron, any of your projects coming up, you're more than welcome. Reach out to me and we'll chat.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Everybody out there, wake up.
Yeah. It's worth it.
It really is worth it.
Yes.
Go die now.
Go die now. Yeah. Die before you die.
Very good, guys. You guys take care. Thank you again for coming on.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, that's an amazing conversation today. I want to thank again Ron and John for coming on the show and sharing everything with us. It's been an absolute wonderful show today. Thank you guys all for tuning in as well. Coming up next week here on the Paranormal Spectrum, same time, same place, we have Dr. Heather Lee is joining us. She is going to be discussing the Hatman phenomenon. She is part of the Hatman Project that has been collecting several hundreds of people's encounters with these beings and entities, and she joins us. This is a pre-recorded show. Both of my shows next week are actually pre-recorded, just as a heads up, but it is an amazing conversation with Heather Lee about all that, and it goes off into some weird other directions as well towards the end, so it's going to be an amazing episode. You don't want to miss that next week on the Paranormal Spectrum. Coming up on Monday, Jason Hewlett has a new book out on the legend of Ogopogo, the lake monster. It was just released by Small Town Monsters Publishing, and it goes along with the Small Town Monsters documentary by Eli Watson, Cursed Waters. So he is going to be joining us here on Monday at noon. Again, pre-recorded show for that one. I apologize. Some people just can't make it on live. So I have a lot of pre-recorded shows, but it's awesome to get these people to come on and chat and share some stuff. And obviously you guys can reach out if you have any questions to them directly. But until next week, guys, remember, we are all part of the paranormal spectrum. We are all in this together. Take care, be well, and I'll see you next week, guys.
You seem to know something I don't. What's going on?